I know, you want me to analyze Dirt Free, but it turns out that the Dirt Free analysis video is gonna take longer than I expected. So, all I'm gonna say is please be patient, Dirt Free analysis video is coming soon. And because I couldn't make it on time, today I am analyzing a different game. Today we are analyzing a game called Crash Time 2. Hi everyone, as always Patrick here. If you're already subscribed, make sure you turn on notifications, otherwise YouTube won't tell you if I posted anything. If you are new to the channel, make sure you watch until the very end and consider subscribing if you like it. Okay, Crash Time 2. Crash Time 2 was developed by Cinetic and published by Meridian 4 and RTL Interactive back in 2008. Crash Time 2 is a game that I've played before. I've played it once, back when it came out, back in 2008. When I've played the game all those years ago, I remember liking it and I do remember enjoying myself, but now that I've played it again after all those years, I just don't feel the same way. Why? Let me explain in this entire analysis video, and as always, we are going to start by analyzing the graphics. Graphically, for a game released back in 2008, it does look pretty good, especially when you consider the fact that it was made with a tiny budget. Although when it comes to small details, it's a mixed bag. Normally I would say that the game does have high resolution textures, but in some places there are textures that look really bad and outdated. Even if you play on the highest graphical settings. Especially when you consider the fact that this game has the same graphics as Ferrari Virtual Racing, another Cinetic game that I have already made an analysis video about. The difference is, in Crash Time 2, those minor graphical errors are more forgivable, mainly because Crash Time 2 came out in 2008 and Ferrari Virtual Race came out in 2009, 1 year apart. There are also things which Crash Time 2 does very well. For example, the game has a nice realistic art style. The game also avoided that annoying trope of making everything brown and grey. And I also love the car reflections. I actually like them more here than I liked them in Ferrari Virtual Race, despite the fact that both of those games use basically the same graphics. Let's make a small comparison between Crash Time 2 and Ferrari Virtual Race. While Crash Time 2 has bad texture quality in some places, Ferrari Virtual Race has bad background quality. Yeah, and also, sorry for making those long pauses, by the way, but Crash Time 2 also has explosions, as you have probably seen before, and while they are not terrible, you can clearly see that they are outdated by today's standards. I would compare more things, but I don't want to make the video too long. There's also one more problem when it comes to the graphics, however this problem depends on your point of view. This is a problem that some people like and some people don't. And I'm one of those people that's somewhere in between. There's so much bloom in this game. And like I've said before, just a few seconds ago, I'm somewhere in between when it comes to this. On one hand, I like it because the reflections of the cars, oh my god, when sun shines on the car, it looks beautiful. But it's also bad because this bloom is pretty blinding and not in a realistic kind of sense. It fits with the art style and it does help with hiding bad textures quality most of the time anyway. Sometimes the bloom actually makes the game a lot uglier, and just like in Ferrari Virtual Race, you cannot turn this off. While I don't have a problem with bloom in this game, I would rather play games without this option. I have the same thing to say about the motion blur. As you can see in my footage, I have turned motion blur off because while it's exactly the same as in Ferrari Virtual Race, um, it's not incredibly distracting. I just don't like playing games with this option. It makes some things way too blurry when it really shouldn't. And while it can help you smooth the frame rate if you have a pretty bad PC, normally I suggest playing games without motion blur. That's cool and all, but what about the graphical settings? Well, as I've mentioned before, the game uses the same graphics and the same build of the 3D landscape engine as Ferrari Virtual Race, and because of that, Crash Time 2 suffers from the same problems. Most graphical options you would expect from a game released in 2008 are there. The game does support widescreen resolutions like 1080p. There is VSync, there is anti-aliasing. The game does run at high FPS, so it's all good. There are two problems with the graphical options though, similar to Ferrari Virtual Race. The first problem, there is no anisotropic filtering, which is weird because Ferrari Virtual Race did have anisotropic filtering. However, Ferrari Virtual Race didn't have VSync, so I don't know. I guess they kept it consistent. I mean, I did say they used the same build of the engine. And the second issue, there's no FOV slider. The funny thing is, the game does have a pretty big support from modders. So why did no one bother to fix the FOV? I have no idea, but if any modder is watching this, please find a workaround for the FOV. What about this stability? The game didn't crash, it didn't stutter, it didn't lag, even when I was recording, so it's a good PC release, but there are few issues on your way. I know that I've made various comparisons to Ferrari Virtual Race, since it's fair, but what about the competition? What about the other games that came out in 2008? In 2008, we had games like Trackmania United Forever, iRacing, Score International Baja 1000, Superstar Racing, no, not the one by Milestone. The one by Milestone is called Superstars V8 Racing, and it was made in 2009. There are also some big ones like Burnout Paradise, French Street Racing, Trials to 2nd Edition, Ford Racing Off-Road, and of course the biggest release of 2008 when it comes to racing, Race Driver Grid. When you compare the graphics of Crash Time 2 to those games I've just mentioned, Crash Time 2 does look good, but it just cannot compete with the others. Okay, now that I've talked about the graphics for 9.5 minutes, it's time to talk about the story. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, oh, it's a budget game, it's probably just another one of those games that doesn't have a story. Well, I have news for you. This game actually has a story. Well, actually it has multiple different stories, but let me explain. For the purpose of the video, I'm just going to tell you only about one story, aka the very first story you'll see, the Flying Low case, part 1 only. In Flying Low Part 1, Samir and Ben are called from the HQ. They are told to escort a vehicle, and they basically have to meet the other police officers and the vehicle they're supposed to escort in 5 minutes at the containment harbor. Once they get there, they start escorting the vehicle. During the escort, two random cars try to attack the car you trying to escort. You lose your police officers, but this doesn't stop you. Samir and Ben, actually one of them, takes the control of the truck there's the vehicle you're supposed to escort, and then it leaves one of you to deal with the others, with those two black cars. You do manage to get one of them, but the other one was able to flee. That's what happens when you try to go it alone. As you would expect, the story continues in Flying Low Part 2. Like I've said before, every single case has a different story, but if I try to explain every single story, then the video would be 5 hours long, and I never want a video to be that long, so let's just move on. But before I can move on, we need to talk about the voice acting, and the voice acting is, well...
Samir, Ben, we have a hostage situation, and all our units are out there in order to find the hostage. Leave no stone unturned in our district. The person is probably hidden in one of the old industrial halls, by the container harbor, or at the mining site, but you should also check along the autobahn.
Samir, we hear you, Chief. Commencing the search now.
One more thing. The hostage is wearing a bomb, and the kidnapper threatened to ignite it unless we meet his demands. The deadline will expire in just a few minutes.
And here I was thinking we had been notified early for once and could conduct our search in peace.
Roger, Chief. We're on our way.
Okay, look, I know this is a budget game and they probably couldn't afford the best actors in the world, but oh man, this is way worse than I imagined. It's not all terrible though. The calls from the HQ sound fine, but the main characters sound bland and bad. It's like they're not even trying. But that's all you need to know about the story and the voice acting. So now let's talk about the gameplay, and as you would expect, there's a lot to talk about. At times you will see those giant stop signs, and they have many different purposes. If you're in free roam, you can sometimes activate missions while driving towards them. Sometimes when they're not red, they are brown, and the brown ones basically repair your vehicle fully, and they appear again after you drive out of the circle, so you can repair your car as much as you please, so there's no problem. There's also one more kind of stop signs, and they basically let you transition between the maps. If you want to go from the city to Autobahn, you can do it, and vice versa. The world around you in this game is also destructible. Most minor objects can be destroyed simply by driving through them. There are also fences and other things similar to fences that can be destroyed, and that way you can make yourself a new pathway. That is always nice to see in games like this. Making a destructible environment, especially when a game is called something like Crash Time, is nice to see. Crashing as expected in this kind of game should let you create alternate pathways, and the game definitely succeeds at that. Simply put, the open world in this game is very good. Is it better than other racing games? Open world racing games? I don't know really. It's definitely one of the better ones, but is it the best one? Not sure. Now let's quickly talk about the UI. As I've mentioned many times before in this video, the game shares the same build of the 3D landscape engine with Ferrari Virtual Race, and the UI and the HUD is almost the same. The placement of the HUD is pretty much the same. You still have the damage meter, the laps and whatnot. The speedometer is almost the same. There is one small difference. Instead of the gears in Ferrari Virtual Race, the gears were on the left side on the screen, but in this game they are on the right side, and the left side is shows your nitro. In this particular mission, it's turned off by default, but you can also use nitro. You can really use it to speed up your car, as nitro should, of course. Sometimes the speedometer goes really wide. That's because if you are going up a ramp or you're about to make a big jump, the game gives you this green arrow. This green arrow it tells you the recommended speed for making the jump. And it definitely helps. But if you go too far, you will probably miss the jump completely. So I definitely suggest that you take a close look at this green arrow. It will really help you with making those jumps. The HUD also displays your current objective. So basically, in this case, the game shows how many waypoints do you have to go through, how many waypoints you got, how much time you have left, how much property damage you did, and other stuff like that. It always changes depending on the mission, so it gets repetitive sometimes, but most of the time it's pretty consistent. This is the part where I would talk about the physics, but before I talk about the physics, we need to talk about the cars, and there's a lot of them. There are over 20 cars in the game, split into many different categories. The categories are, well, actually let me explain. You can drive normal vehicles, police vehicles, sports vehicles, hypercars, cabs, taxis, trucks, even tanks. You can also drive silly vehicles like, for example, go-karts and excavators. Basically, the game has a very nice car variety. You can choose any vehicle you want from the main menu, if it's unlocked of course, and you can just explore the world and have fun. There is a small problem with that variety, but I'm going to leave it for the negative aspects of the game section. The modding community also creates many different vehicles, and since they're mods, you can easily add them to the game and have an even bigger variety. That is always nice to see. This is also why I might look confused in this footage, and by look confused, I mean I don't really know what I'm doing, so sorry about that. As you would expect, the driving is arcadey. There is no simulation in this game in any way whatsoever, but that's not a bad thing actually. It actually really fits in a game called Crash Time. The cars are both easy to control and fun to use, even if you turn off the Arcade Plus mode. Some cases are pretty similar to each other, especially if they are one continuous story, but most of them are different from each other, and they also offer many different tasks. In this one, I have to stop at the stop signs. I have to reach all 14 waypoints in less than 7 minutes, and I have to avoid doing too much property damage. In this case, for 40,000 euros. Yes, euros. The damage is counted in euros. But those tasks also depend on the difficulty you choose. For example, easy difficulty is the most forgiving. You can do much more. Property damage, for example, in this mission it's 80,000 instead of 40,000 since I was playing on hard. You also get more time. You get the same amount of waypoints. You just get more time, and you can destroy more things on your way, which makes sense because this game is called Crash Time 2. Now, of course, not every mission in the game is difficult like the one you're watching right now, especially on hard mode. Some of them are actually really easy, like Race to the Finish Line, and other simple missions like that. So don't worry, those missions shouldn't give you much trouble. Most of the cases are very well designed, especially the ones where you do racing. They are even better when you activate the minimap. Then you know exactly what you should do. So no worries, and I think that's all I need to say about the gameplay. I think I talked about every single aspect of it. If I forgot anything, please let me know in the comments down below. Okay, now it's time to talk about the part you've been waiting for, the bad stuff. In this game you have a roadmap. You can access it anytime when you pause the game. You pause the game, you press roadmap, and you can see the entire map. Depending on the map you are, it can be either city map or the autobahn map. The problem is you can't set up your own waypoints. They do show up when you are in the mission, and when you are in free roam mode you can see where you can go. You can see all the stops you can reach and how to access the other map depending on which map you are, the city or the autobahn, but you just cannot set your own waypoint. Thankfully, if you have the minimap enabled, the minimap also has a GPS which tells you where you should go in the mission, but it's not perfect either. You have to. The game doesn't really show where if you should go. The minimap doesn't show you if you should go up or down or just goes mainly up or down. This can make the layout really confusing because if you go off the beaten path, the minimap generates a new path for you. But even that is not good because the minimap doesn't show you if you should go up or down. It's not very precise, that's what I'm trying to say. Another issue with the game is that some cases can be unforgiving. They're not incredibly hard, but they can be unforgiving. There is one case in the game, sadly I forgot the name of it, sorry, where in one missions you have to chase down a vehicle, but during the chase, sorry for stuttering, you have to achieve 2 perfect jumps or more depending on which difficulty you're playing. This is very annoying because the game never tells you this, never tells you how to achieve perfect jumps, and because of that you might just replay this one mission constantly. So how do you achieve the perfect jump? You have to use the ramp the game gives you, and not only that, you have to land in the exact spot the game tells you. This is not how the perfect jump works. Normally when I think of perfect jumps, I think of, perfect landings and stuff like that, but there's no such thing as a perfect landing. There's only this one thing called a perfect spot. Not only this is confusing to new players, even experienced players can have a problem with this, since the game doesn't explain that very well. Speaking of not explaining things very well, this game has a tutorial. If I'm not mistaken, this is the only game in the series that has a tutorial. If I'm wrong, you can tell me in the comments down below. But let's get back to the topic. While this tutorial explains most things about the gameplay, there are some things that it just never tells you, the player, of course. To activate some missions, you have to be in a very specific vehicle, but the game never tells you which vehicle you should use. The same goes for the phone calls as well, not just a specific points you have to reach. So what's the problem? How do you find out? Sorry, more specific. Sorry for stuttering. How do you find out which vehicle you should use? While you choose a vehicle, there's a little flag by the name of the vehicle. This tells you that you can use using this vehicle will activate a mission, either a mission made by a phone call, or it can be or it can be a specific waypoint. Also, the game never tells you which map you should go to activate a mission, well, besides the whole flag thing. Which means that most new players will be very confused, because you might choose a vehicle and you might choose a good vehicle but a bad map, and you will just do nothing but keep exploring the map. And while exploring in this game is fun, you just get soft locked and you don't know what to do. And the same thing goes the other way around. You can choose a good map but bad vehicle. This I don't even think that I need to say why this is a bad thing. And the last problem, which I can think of the top of my head, is with one of the vehicles. While most cars in the game are pretty fun to use and drive around, there's one vehicle, more specifically a hypercar, that I just cannot stand at all. And no, it's not the Formula C11 car. Sadly, I forgot the name of the car. I'm so sorry. It's the red one with those weird engine things in the back. You probably know which one I'm talking about, if you've played the game, of course. This car has a lot of speed. You can reach about 500 kilometers per hour with this thing, but it is uncontrollable. You cannot control this at all. The problem is, some cases, more specifically 2 cases in the game, require you to use this in a chase. You have to either destroy the opponent or force him to stop during the chase. And while the vehicle will catch up to your opponent, you will spin around about 1000 times before doing so. That is actually the worst hypercar I have ever used in any video game. I am not even joking. Okay, I think this video is long enough. In conclusion, Crash Time 2, despite its flaws, it's a fun game. While it can't really compete graphically with other bigger titles, especially back in 2008, it still looks pretty good, has a nice art style, and it's actually colorful and not brown and gray like most racing games at that time. The stories are all over the place, honestly, but they are fun to experience every once in a while. And the gameplay is also pretty fun, despite the fact that it has many flaws. I have only mentioned 5 in this video, but still, the gameplay is fun and I would say this game is worth checking out despite all of its flaws. The game is also dirt cheap on Steam, so it also goes on sale almost all the time. So yeah, I would say go buy it if you like it. If you will like it, that's completely fine. If not, maybe this game isn't for you. Despite all of that, why do I like it less? Less after all those years, I mean. It's simple, the nostalgia simply doesn't hold up. But that pretty much sums up everything I wanted to say in this analysis video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.